They told him to keep his head down and mop. But when a silent CEO was about to be humiliated in public, Malik Porter stood up and spoke her language. What happened next shook the hotel, exposed buried truths, and forced America to rethink who gets to speak and who's expected to stay quiet. Ma'am, this isn't Tokyo. Either speak English or step aside. Malik had heard a lot of things while scrubbing marble floors at the Royal Grand Hotel. But that line, that one, made him freeze mid-mop. It wasn't the words, it was the way they sliced through the air loud enough to silence even the early morning clatter of luggage wheels. He glanced up from the corner of the lobby, where he'd just polished a brass trash can. Across the room stood a woman, Japanese, dignified, unmoving. Her coat was deep navy, her hands clasped in front of her like she was standing in a tea garden, not in a five-star hotel, being stared down by Sheila Corman, the new hotel manager, who wore her authority like perfume, thick and cloying. "She's not being aggressive," whispered a younger staff member. "She just won't speak." "She's refusing to communicate," Sheila snapped. "It's disruption, not discretion." Malik recognized that tone. It wasn't frustration. It was fear hiding behind control. And he knew in his gut what came next. The woman would be written off, escorted out, silenced. Not because she was wrong, but because she wouldn't perform. And in this country, silence is rarely seen as power. He stepped back behind his cart, tried to blend into the wallpaper again. That was the job after all. Stay invisible. Stay safe. But the woman's eyes flicked toward him just once. Not pleading, not desperate. Just steady. Malik's mother used to have eyes like that, back when she still walked these same halls in the same uniform. Before they called her negligent and pushed her out with a severance check and whispers. Grace Porter never told Malik the full story, only that working hard wasn't always enough. So Malik put down the mop. He didn't know what he was doing. His heart pounded like sneakers on hardwood as he walked toward the scene. He could feel Sheila's stare before she even turned. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "This doesn't concern." But he didn't answer her. He faced the woman, gave a small, respectful bow, and said in crisp, Kyoto-accented Japanese, "Ocha demo ikaga desu ka? Shanchi-yang. Would you care for a cup of tea, Miss Yamazaki?" The lobby froze. The Japanese woman blinked once, then slowly tilted her head. "Yatsuto shue kaga pune de kuriru," she murmured. Finally, someone who listens. Her assistant's jaw dropped. Malik gestured toward the lounge. "It's quieter there." They walked away together, Malik in his janitor's uniform, and the CEO of Yamazaki Robotics, trailing just behind him, her heels clicking like punctuation on stone. No grand speech, no drama, just movement. Behind them, Sheila sputtered something about protocol. But no one moved to follow. A nearby concierge stared at his screen. A bellboy pretended to polish a cart. And somewhere in the corner, a guest quietly tapped record on their phone. Malik didn't know it yet, but that quiet act, the bow, the language the tea would be watched 3.6 million times before the sunset. In the lounge, everything slowed. Akiko Yamazaki didn't speak right away. She simply sat straight-backed eyes, scanning the room like a general in a quiet war. Malik poured the tea slowly, the way his professor once taught him in Kyoto. Elbow level, eyes low, silence, respected. "You speak my language," she said at last in English, laced with Kyoto restraint. He nodded. 7 years of linguistics. Kyoto University. But I left. Why, she asked. Malik smiled without joy. My mother got sick. Cancer. I dropped out to work. Cleaning jobs. This one stuck. Akiko's gaze sharpened. What is your mother's name? Grace Porter. Something flickered across her face. She once brought me ginger tea. 10 years ago. I was here negotiating robotics contracts. She was the only one who treated me like a guest. Malik stilled. She was fired, wasn't she? He swallowed. She told me she quit. Said she needed rest. No, Akiko said quietly. She took the fall for someone else's theft. I never forgot her eyes. Or the silence she was forced into. Malik felt like the floor had shifted under his chair. All these years, his mother's resignation was a choice, he thought. Now he knew better. She had stayed quiet to protect him. "I wasn't going to speak today," Akiko added. "I was testing this hotel before bringing my global summit here. I wanted to know who listens when the words are difficult." Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat was tight. This wasn't just about a guest anymore. This was about history repeating itself. He looked down at his hands, calloused, steady, covered in lemon-scented residue. And he remembered what his mother once told him, when he was 13, scrubbing his first kitchen floor. Silence is only golden when you choose it. He hadn't chosen it. Neither had she. Akiko raised her teacup in silent acknowledgement. In the hallway outside, Sheila was already dialing HR. Sheila's voice echoed from the hallway just outside the lounge, sharp and urgent. "Yes, HR Barnes. No Porter. Malik Porter. Yes, the janitor." He broke protocol by addressing a VIP guest, directly unauthorized interaction. "I want him written up immediately." Malik didn't hear it, but he felt it. That creeping tension behind the walls, the tightening of power grasping for control. He'd felt it before when teachers would lower their voices after saying his name, when store managers followed him with their eyes instead of their words. It always came after he did something unexpected, something human. Inside the lounge, the silence between him and Akiko was no longer empty. It was sacred. "You shouldn't have spoken to me," she said calmly. Not as a rebuke, but as a warning. "You know what they'll do." Malik leaned back slightly. "They've been trying to erase people like me since the foundation was laid. I'm just not going to help them do it today." Akiko studied him. "You understand the cost of what you did." He nodded. "Yeah, but I also know what it costs to stay silent." Outside, the video had already hit Twitter. Captioned by a tourist who'd happened to be at the front desk, it read "the janitor who spoke her language." 10 seconds of footage. Malik bowing, Akiko nodding, then walking away together. In an hour, it had 200,000 views. Inside the hotel, no one yet knew the clip existed, except Sheila's assistant, who had seen it, and quietly closed the browser tab without comment. Back in the lounge, Akiko set her cup down and folded her hands. "My company hosts summits across the world. Thousands attend. But in every city before contracts are signed, I arrive early. Alone. No press, no translators. I watch how they treat silence." "You don't trust words," Malik asked. "I trust intention. And silence is where intention lives." Malik chuckled softly. "In America, silence makes people uncomfortable. It doesn't say enough. Or maybe it says too much," she replied. "I don't mind discomfort. I mind dishonesty." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Then I think you've come to the right place. This hotel has both in surplus." Akiko's lips quirked upward. "I remember your mother's face, you know. She had that same calm, but also sadness, a kind of taut stillness. She used to say the job didn't break her," Malik said. "It just taught her how people look right through you when you're not wearing a name tag with power on it. She deserved better. They told her to be grateful she had work." Akiko's eyes turned sharp. "And now they'll tell you the same." At that moment, a knock on the glass door. A junior manager peeked in, stiff and nervous. "Miss Yamazaki HR is requesting Mr. Porter's immediate presence in admin." Akiko didn't move. "Tell them he's with me." The manager blinked. I think they want him written up for a conduct violation." Malik stood. "It's okay. I'll go." But Akiko rose too. "Then I'm coming." The hallway outside felt colder. Voices quieted as they passed. Phones shifted in hands. Malik could feel it, the weight of visibility. Not the good kind, the threatening kind. At the HR office, Sheila was already waiting, arms crossed, like she owned the oxygen in the room. "Mr. Porter," she said, feigning cordiality, "would you like to explain why you saw fit to insert yourself into a sensitive guest interaction?" "No need." Akiko interrupted. "I invited him." Sheila blinked, stunned. "You? Invited?" He spoke to me in my language, treated me like a person, and de-escalated a situation your staff had already mishandled. I call that hospitality. This is a matter of internal protocol, Sheila snapped, not PR optics. Is that what you think this is? Akiko asked quietly. Optics. Malik watched as something shifted in the room. For the first time, Sheila wasn't fully in control. She was reacting. I came to this hotel under anonymity because I needed to know how you treat silence. Akiko continued. And now I know. She stepped toward the desk and set a business card down. Malik Porter did something your staff couldn't. He listened. And if this hotel fires him or disciplines him, my company will host its summit elsewhere, in a city that respects people more than protocols. She turned and walked out. Malik didn't follow her. He stayed because he knew the battle wasn't over. Because for once, he wasn't just fighting for a paycheck. He was fighting for what his mother never got, a moment of truth that didn't require translation. As the door shut behind her, Sheila's face hardened. You've made quite the mess, Mr. Porter. Malik folded his hands. No, ma'am. I just stopped cleaning one. And somewhere down the hall, an email pinged in the hotel's PR inbox. The subject line, the janitor who saved the brand. The sender, CNN. And that's when Malik realized this wasn't just about a guest and a janitor anymore. It was about every person who had ever been unseen, and every silence that had been mistaken for ignorance. And something told him the next hour would change everything. The next hour did change everything. But not in the way Malik expected. By the time he returned to the janitor's closet to grab his things, his phone, an old Android with a cracked corner, was buzzing uncontrollably. Texts from a cousin in Atlanta, a classmate from freshman year he hadn't heard from in 5 years, even a reporter from a local news blog. Is this you, bro? You trending? CNN's asking for a quote. He stared at the thumbnail preview. It was blurry, badly framed, but unmistakable him in uniform, bowing ever so slightly as Akiko Yamazaki accepted his gesture with calm grace. The caption, sometimes dignity wears a name tag. The image had gone viral. He should have felt proud, maybe vindicated. Instead, his stomach sank. Because he knew what came after visibility, scrutiny, backlash, and silence all over again. Malik stuffed the phone back into his locker and sat down on the small bench inside the closet. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and dust. His mother used to say this place was built on polish, not character. They want the floor spotless, but your spirit invisible. He ran a hand down his face. The image of Sheila's eyes, tight, calculating, lingered like the aftertaste of vinegar. Then, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, until he heard the voice. Mr. Porter, this is Daniel Okada, executive assistant to Miss Yamazaki. She's asked for you to meet her. 15th floor, conference suite. Now, if possible. The 15th floor. Malik had never even set foot there. That was executive territory, reserved for high-profile guests, VIP banquets, and closed-door board meetings. Maintenance staff didn't go up there unless something was broken, and even then, only under escort. Now she was inviting him. Minutes later, Malik stood outside the suite, his uniform freshly tucked palms sweating. The hallway was lined with abstract art, and the kind of silence that felt intentional, like even sound had to be approved before entering. He knocked once. The door opened. Inside the suite was sleek, all glass and steel, and soft beige lighting. Akiko was seated by the window, laptop open, but her eyes were on him before he even stepped fully in. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I didn't think I had a choice." Malik replied, then immediately regretted how that sounded. But Akiko didn't flinch. She smiled, just faintly. "That's what makes you honest." He sat unsure of where this was going. She closed the laptop and leaned forward. "I've done a little research," she said. "You were enrolled at Tufts University. Linguistics. Near the top of your class. You left your junior year. My mom got sick, and you've been working here ever since. Malik nodded. Bills don't care about ambition. I remember your mother, Akiko said. Not just her tea. Her eyes. She carried something quiet, but strong. She never told me what happened. Malik admitted. She said she left. That it was time. Akiko hesitated, then reached into her blazer. She slid a folded envelope across the table. It was creased and slightly yellowed. The front read, "To management, but never sent." Malik picked it up, his mother's handwriting. Inside the letter was short. A quiet protest. A simple defense against an accusation she never had the power to fight. It wasn't angry. It was tired, dignified. She had been blamed for a missing shipment of luxury wines used by executives for off-the-record events. She took the fall knowing protest would only make it worse. She never mailed it, Akiko said. But she handed me a copy the day she left. I've kept it ever since. Malik stared at the words, his throat tightening. Why give this to me now? Because what you did for me, she once did for others. And they erased her. He folded the letter carefully, like it was something holy. I'm not just here for a summit, Akiko added. I'm here to decide which institution deserves to host a generation of global leaders. I don't need chandeliers. I need truth. Malik looked up, his voice low. Then, you need to know what kind of truth this place hides. He told her about the unspoken rules, the way promotions bypassed workers with accents, the way management used protocol as a shield for prejudice. He spoke without drama, just clarity. Akiko listened without taking notes, just nodding, absorbing. When he finished, she said, Then I'll make this decision not just as a CEO, but as a former girl who once felt invisible. He blinked. You? She smiled softly. I moved to America at 19, full scholarship, but no one could pronounce my name. So they called me Miss Tokyo. Even professors. I stopped speaking in class because I got tired of translating my own identity. Malik leaned back. That's why you let silence speak. It's not weakness, she said. It's restraint. But sometimes silence needs a translator. There was a long pause. The city moved behind the glass cars, crawling people shrinking into specks. Inside that suite, two lives once quiet sat now in full volume. Akiko stood. Tomorrow, I'll speak to the board. But I won't do it alone. Malik raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She offered him her business card. You're not just a janitor, Mr. Porter. You're proof. And this hotel needs to remember what it tried to forget. As he took the card, Malik didn't feel elevated. He felt grounded, like finally the roots his mother planted were growing toward light. But just as he stepped into the hallway, his phone buzzed again. A new email. Subject: Internal Disciplinary Review. Unauthorized guest interaction from HR committee. And in that moment, he realized the hotel wasn't done fighting back. But neither was he. The subject line glared back at him like a warning shot. Internal Disciplinary Review, Unauthorized Guest Interaction. Malik stood frozen in the hallway outside the suite, still holding Akiko's business card in one hand and his mother's unsent letter in the other. So this was it. No phone call, no conversation, just a decision delivered in cold Helvetica font, stripped of nuance, context, or courage. Malik wasn't surprised. The Royal Grand never punished you directly. It just quietly opened the door and waited for you to leave with your dignity half intact. He stared at the phone a moment longer, then took a deep breath and slipped it into his pocket. If they wanted silence, they picked the wrong janitor. Downstairs in the HR office, the energy had shifted. Word of the viral clip had trickled up through the management ranks. Executives whispered in corridors, unsure whether to call it a PR crisis or a golden opportunity. No one had yet figured out how to spin it, and no one certainly expected the janitor to respond. But Malik wasn't playing along. Instead of retreating, he printed the email, walked to the back supply room, and pinned it on the staff bulletin board just above the break schedule, and beneath a faded poster that read, "Respect starts with us." He wrote one word in red ink at the top of the page seen. By the time he returned to the lobby, eyes were already watching him differently. The overnight doorman gave him a small nod. A housekeeper paused just long enough to whisper, "Your mom would be proud." Even Marcus, the night concierge, tapped him on the shoulder and said Sheila's planning something upstairs. "I'd stay ready. Always am," Malik replied. Up on the executive level, Sheila was indeed planning something. She stood at the head of the boardroom table, hair pulled tight, voice sharp. "He's weaponizing a moment of basic courtesy into a power play. He is not trained in guest relations, not certified in protocol, and certainly not authorized to speak on behalf of this hotel. But the guest herself is supporting him," one director pointed out. "She's supporting an image," Sheila snapped. "A narrative. We control the facts." And the fact is, he broke chain of command. Another executive raised a hand. "With all due respect, if we discipline him now with public attention rising, we'll look like we're punishing decency." Sheila's jaw flexed. "Then maybe it's time to remind the public who we are." But what she didn't realize was that the public had already decided. The story was no longer theirs to control. Because while they debated strategy upstairs, Malik was sitting in the staff lounge, watching the video hit 1.7 million views. And in the comments, "We need more Malik Porters. This is how real leadership looks. Dignity doesn't wear a title." He didn't comment, didn't respond. Instead, he took out a small envelope from his backpack, one he hadn't opened in years. On the front, "For Malik, when you forget your worth." His mother's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten note. "Son, if the world makes you invisible, make truth louder than your fear. Don't just work. Witness. Don't just clean. Confront. You are not what they expect, and that is your gift." He read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in his wallet next to his old student ID from Tufts. It was time. He returned to the executive floor, not as a janitor, but as someone no longer willing to mop up other people's messes without speaking on it. The door to the boardroom was open, Sheila mid-sentence when he walked in. "Mr. Porter," she said, her tone slicing. "This is a closed session." "No, ma'am," Malik replied. "This is the part where you finally get to listen." Sheila opened her mouth to object, but Akiko's voice cut in firm and composed. "Let him speak." Malik walked to the center of the room. No notes, no prep, just truth. "You sent me a disciplinary notice for showing a guest basic respect," he said, voice steady. "But what you really didn't like was that someone like me became visible. And not just visible, respected." "You undermined staff structure," Sheila said flatly. "No," he replied. "I exposed what's underneath it." He reached into his pocket and held up his mother's letter. 10 years ago, you erased the name Grace Porter. You blamed her for theft she didn't commit. You buried her resignation in HR folders and corporate silence. But you didn't erase her spirit. I carry it every day." The room went quiet. Akiko stood. "I witnessed the way this hotel treated silence as a liability. I watched as a man with more cultural sensitivity than your entire hospitality staff was threatened with termination for offering tea. If your board wants to continue working with me, this ends now." She turned to Sheila. "You may run this hotel, but I run the summit. And I don't hold events in places that punish empathy." One executive finally spoke. "What are you proposing?" Akiko gestured toward Malik. "That you reinstate Mr. Porter immediately and promote him to internal cultural liaison. Not as a favor, as a necessity." Sheila looked as if she'd swallowed glass. The vote didn't take long. 7-2. Malik Porter was reinstated, promoted, and formally recognized as a representative of the Royal Grand's new direction. As he walked out of that boardroom, the hallway looked different. Not because the carpet changed, but because he had. And just as he reached the elevator, a text buzzed through from an unknown number. "This isn't over. Watch your back." He stared at it, smiled faintly, then deleted it. Because whoever sent it hadn't learned the lesson yet, Malik Porter no longer feared being seen. He feared being silent. And in the distance, beneath the polished floors, something bigger had started to crack. The crack had started small. A warning text, a closed-door vote, a janitor becoming a symbol. But Malik Porter knew what cracks do best is spread. By the next morning, the lobby didn't feel the same. Guests stopped to glance his way. Some nodded, a few whispered. Staff members who once passed him like furniture now greeted him with unsure smiles, the kind that didn't know if they meant good morning or I'm sorry. Malik didn't return any of it. He just did his job until he didn't. Because halfway through wiping down the brass edges of the concierge desk, a junior staffer from housekeeping slipped him a folded napkin with shaking fingers. It read, "Check inventory logs. March 4th, 9th floor. It wasn't your mom." He looked up, but the girl was already gone. Back to folding towels in invisible silence. Malik stood frozen. March 4th. The date his mother was accused of stealing a case of Chateau d'Amblay, 1996 French wine, worth more than her annual salary. He'd always suspected it didn't add up. But he never had proof. And he never dared look for it. Now he did. That night, after hours, Malik returned to the staff records room with the quiet urgency of someone carrying a crowbar to a locked memory. The place smelled of toner old ink and dusted lies. He entered the date and floor number into the old desktop terminal. Access denied, administrative only. He stared at the screen, then opened the nearby filing cabinet row after row of manila folders. And there, it was nearly buried under irrelevant reports. Mar 4 Incident 9th FL. He opened it, expecting nothing. But inside an invoice, signed by Sheila Corman, authorizing a private gathering for a regional investor group that evening. And beneath it, another paper. An acknowledgement form that the wine had arrived, signed by an assistant manager, who no longer worked at the hotel. But the kicker, a post-event note wine, moved to storage per verbal request of Corman. No mention of Grace Porter. No signature from housekeeping. No record of a loss. His hands trembled not with fear, but with confirmation. It had been buried, whitewashed, filed away under too late to care. Malik stuffed the documents into his bag and backed out of the room, right into Marcus. "You were never going to let it go, were you?" The concierge said, arms crossed. "Did you know?" Malik asked, voice sharp. Marcus sighed. "I suspected. But back then, saying something would have cost my job. I had kids. I had a mother," Malik said, "who thought silence was safer than truth." Marcus stepped aside. "Not anymore." The next morning, Malik walked into Akiko's suite and dropped the file on her table. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. "This is more than mismanagement," he said. "It's character assassination." "And now it's exposure," she replied. "But we have to be smart." "What do you mean?" "I mean, let's do it publicly." Malik blinked. "You want to take this to the press?" "No," Akiko said. "I want to take it to the people who matter most, the staff. The ones who've been told they don't count." That afternoon, the Royal Grand's internal town hall began like any other quiet grumbling. A plate of bagels, no one touched, department heads pretending not to check their watches. Then, Akiko walked in flanked by her assistant and Malik. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I was going to host my summit here," she began. "And I still might. But not before we address something more important than any contract." She gestured toward Malik, who stepped forward slowly, holding the file. "My mother was a janitor here," he said. "She was forced out 10 years ago over a lie that lived in your filing cabinets while you built your brand on smiles and service." He laid out the documents on a side table, inviting anyone to come forward and read. And then, he did something that stunned even Akiko. He took the mic and turned it toward the staff. "Has anyone else here ever been silenced?" he asked. A pause. Then one hand went up. Then another. A dishwasher. A bellboy. A housekeeper who had been demoted after reporting harassment. One by one, the invisible began to speak. And in the back of the room, Sheila stood stiff, frozen. Until Akiko turned to her, and said not cruelly, but with a clarity that cracked through protocol like thunder. "Is there anything you'd like to say, Ms. Corman?" Sheila blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. And for the first time, Malik saw what silence could mean for someone like her defeat. She walked out. Akiko looked around the room. This isn't just about one incident. It's about rewriting the contract between dignity and labor. Malik stepped forward again. We clean the floors. We fold the linens. We translate cultures without being asked. And we matter. Applause wasn't loud, but it was real. That night, Malik called his mother. She didn't say much, just breathed hard into the phone and whispered, "I knew you'd find it one day." But before he could respond, she added, "Don't stop now." And he wouldn't. Because now the story was no longer about the wine, or the email, or the guest who listened. It was about all the voices that had been silenced, and were just starting to echo. And tomorrow, those echoes would meet microphones. The echoes did meet microphones, but not in the way Malik expected. By dawn, the quiet ripples from the staff town hall had become a wave. An anonymous employee had live-streamed part of Malik's speech. The footage, grainy but powerful, captured his words, "We matter." Within hours, it was clipped, shared, retweeted. Suddenly, Malik Porter wasn't just a janitor. With a voice, he was a symbol of something much larger. The media requests poured in like a monsoon. CNN, NPR, local affiliates. Even Good Morning America sent a polite inquiry through the hotel's PR inbox, asking if Mr. Porter would consider speaking on air about courage in the workplace. Malik wasn't sure whether to laugh or panic. He'd spoken for his mother, for the silenced, not to become a soundbite. But in the hotel boardroom, the pressure felt different. Executives paced. Phone lines blinked red. And for the first time in her career, Sheila Corman sat quietly, arms crossed. Not because she was calm, but because she had no play left. "Damage control is no longer possible," the head of PR whispered. "He's already the narrative." And then came the twist no one expected. Akiko didn't ask for an interview. She called a press conference. Not at a studio. Not at a corporate office. She booked the grand ballroom of the Royal Grand, the very heart of the institution that had buried Grace Porter, and tried to do the same to her son. Malik sat in the back row of the ballroom that morning, watching camera crews assemble under chandeliers he had once wiped with a shaky ladder and a bottle of Windex. He wore a crisp white shirt, still his own, still modest, but his name badge was gone. He wasn't there to serve drinks. He was there to serve truth. At 10:00 a.m. sharp, Akiko stepped to the podium. No teleprompter, no media handlers. Just her. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to share a moment. A memory. A woman once brought me tea here, not because it was her job, but because she saw I needed it. She was later fired for something she didn't do." She looked toward Malik. Her name was Grace Porter. Murmurs rolled through the ballroom. Reporters flipped pages. Cameras panned. And today, her son reminded us all what dignity looks like when no one is watching. Akiko continued. He didn't speak to make headlines. He spoke to break a cycle. She stepped aside, and Malik walked toward the microphone like the floor itself remembered him. He didn't read from a page. He spoke from somewhere deeper. "I was taught to stay in line, to mop the edges, to thank the world for letting me stay invisible." His voice didn't tremble. "But my mother used to say, if you let them forget your name, they'll forget your worth." I didn't come here to be famous. I came here to tell the truth. And the truth is, silence can't fix what silence broke. Flashbulbs popped. "Don't call me brave," he added. "Call me late. Because my mom should have stood here 10 years ago." The applause this time wasn't cautious. It was thunderous. But just as Malik stepped down, a man in the third row stood up tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind that always seemed to belong. He didn't introduce himself. He simply said, "I was here 10 years ago. I signed the incident report that implicated Grace Porter. I never read it. I trusted the system. The air dropped 5 degrees. "I was wrong," he continued. "And I'm sorry. To her, to her son, and to everyone we trained to stay small." He stepped forward and placed his business card on the table beside Malik. "If you ever want to consult for executive ethics, I'd like to hire you." Malik didn't pick up the card. He just nodded. A slow, steady nod, acknowledging the gesture, not excusing the past. After the press left, and the room emptied, Malik sat alone under the lights he used to dust. He looked up, letting the silence settle, not the awkward kind, but the earned kind. Then, Akiko joined him, 2 cups of green tea in hand. "They still think you want revenge," she said. "I don't," Malik replied. "I want repair." She nodded. "That's harder." "I know." They sipped in silence for a long moment. "Will you go back to school?" she asked. Malik stared ahead. "Maybe. But first, I want to teach something." Akiko tilted her head. "What's that?" He looked over, eyes clear. "How to make space for voices that don't shout." Later that evening, Malik visited the rehab center where his mother now stayed. Grace sat on the patio, wrapped in a shawl, watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs like tiny politicians. "I saw you," she said softly. "You didn't blink once." He smiled. "I had your voice in my head." She laughed a short, tired laugh. "Then, I'm sorry you didn't flinch." Malik reached into his bag and placed the returned incident file in her lap. She stared at it. A decade-old wound, now printed in black ink. "I wanted to burn this for years," she whispered. "But you didn't." "No," she said, "because I was waiting for you to find it." They sat in the golden hour light, mother and son, 2 survivors of a system that had tried to write them out, and between them, not shame, not pain, just presence. That night, Malik wrote something new. Not an email, not a tweet, a letter. To those still mopping in silence. "You are not invisible. You are not lucky to be here. They are lucky you stayed. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Especially then." Malik Porter. He didn't post it online. He pinned it to the staff bulletin board right next to the disciplinary notice. And for once, the wall told both sides of the story. Tomorrow the board would meet again, this time to vote on who should lead the hotel's new diversity and inclusion initiative. Malik hadn't submitted his name, but someone else had. And when the time came to speak, he wouldn't raise his voice. He wouldn't need to, because this time the silence would speak for him. The silence did speak for him. When the board convened the next morning, Malik wasn't even in the room. He was on the rooftop of the Royal Grand Broom in hand, sweeping away last night's petals from a private reception that had ended in too many cocktails and too little cleanup. The sky above was pale blue, streaked with the soft promise of spring. He didn't need to be inside that meeting, because this time, the truth was already in the room without him. Downstairs, Akiko sat at the end of the conference table, calm and centered. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet, but final. "If you still believe this hotel's values are best represented by titles and tenure, you're free to vote that way. But I came here looking for a partner, not a mascot. Someone who doesn't need a spotlight to see people clearly. Malik Porter is not applying for a title. He already carries the work." Across the table, some exchanged glances. One executive, who had remained silent through all 6 days of tension, finally spoke. "I watched the footage from the lounge again last night. You can't train for that kind of presence." And without another word, the vote was taken. Unanimous. They didn't even call Malik up. They emailed him, then printed the letter and slid it under the janitor's closet door. He didn't open it right away. When he did, it read, "Effective immediately. Malik Porter is appointed as Director of Cultural Equity and Internal Ethics, reporting directly to the General Manager's office." There was no fanfare, just new keys and a nameplate that read, "Not just a janitor." That evening, Malik stepped into the staff lounge, not as a guest, not as a janitor, not even as a symbol, but as himself. He placed his badge down on the break room table and looked at the same people who once turned away as he passed. "I don't want applause," he said. "I want your trust. If we're going to fix this place, we do it together. From the ground up. No mops, no masks." One by one, hands started clapping. Not loud, but long. From the dishwasher, who hadn't spoken in 3 years. From the bellhop, who had once been warned for talking too much in his native language. From the housekeeper, who had been working double shifts to afford night school. The ones who had learned to survive in whispers. Now, they stood a little taller. Later that week, the hotel launched a new training program, Voices Without Volume, designed by Malik, and a former ethics professor he reconnected with from Tufts. The first session, a listening circle. No speeches, just stories. And in the center of the room, Malik read aloud the first words, "Silence isn't absence. It's weight. And some of us have carried it for generations." That same weekend, Akiko flew back to Tokyo, but not before stopping by the rehab center to see Grace Porter. They sat beneath a dogwood tree, soft blossoms falling like memory. "She told me you once poured her tea when she was alone in this hotel," Akiko said gently. "You didn't know who she was. You just saw her." Grace smiled. "I didn't need to know her title to know she needed dignity." Akiko reached into her bag and pulled out something small, silver delicate, worn a pocket watch. "It belonged to my father," she said. "He taught me that time is the only currency you never earn twice. I want your son to have it, because he used his time to restore something that can't be measured." Grace accepted it with steady hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "He doesn't say much, but when he does, it matters." That night, Malik returned home, poured 2 cups of tea, and sat with his mother. No TV, no phones. Just the clock ticking and the steam rising. After a long silence, Grace said, "You know, I used to dream you'd work with words." "I am," Malik said softly. "Just not the kind people expect." And then, months later, on a quiet morning in the hotel courtyard, Malik noticed a new face. A young trainee uniform. 2 big eyes wide with the weight of uncertainty. They bumped into each other at the vending machine. The kid stammered, "Sorry, sir. I didn't see you." Malik smiled. "You will. One day, everyone will." The kid blinked. "Are you that guy from the video?" Malik chuckled. "Nah, I'm just the guy who stayed." The trainee looked confused. Stayed for what? Malik looked out toward the staff entrance, the sun lighting the edge of the bricks his mother once swept. "For the ones who come next." And then he turned to go. Not into the spotlight, but into the work. Because the story had never been about being heard louder. It had always been about making space for others to speak. This story is about a young black janitor who broke silence in the most powerful way by using his voice when it mattered most. What began as an act of respect became a cultural reckoning, a family's redemption, and a movement for dignity within invisible labor. Malik didn't chase applause. He chased truth, and in doing so, he made room for others to rise. If this story touched, you share it. If you believe the world needs more, Malik Porter, subscribe for more stories that restore faith in people. Because kindness is not weakness, and silence is not the absence of power.